Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by Onyx Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is Onyx Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, Onyx Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust Onyx Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about Onyx, go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbley's rifle. I've been rocking their Coda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbley's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbley's rifles, go to kelbley.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbley Rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I am joined by a wonderful fellow and somebody who is on the front lines of the defense of hunting and the Second Amendment here in America. Somebody who you might not have come across as far as name or any of that, but we're going to be diving into quite a bit of dialogue regarding recruitment of hunters, defense of hunting, recruitment of people who shoot firearms and all that. I have Peter Churchbourne. He's the managing director of the NRA's Hunter Leadership Forum, as well as the managing director of the NRA Hunting, which is completely separate divisions. We'll talk about that. But Peter's been an advocate for hunting for quite a long time, has a rich history all across this nation in the defense and advocacy for hunting. And so I want to bring him on to bring a different perspective than what you might be used to or what you might get in your day-to-day life. So without further ado, Mr. Churchbourne, Peter, great to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So you're based out of the state of Virginia.
I am. I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Used to be a sleepy little old Civil War town, and now it's a thriving metropolis of people who work up in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., unfortunately.
Oh, man. What is it like being a part of being on the forefront of the defense of hunting and the hunting recruitment, having to go to Washington, D.C. and to really be involved in the political side of it?
Yeah, well, I actually, fortunately, don't have to go to DC that much, and I don't do a whole lot of politics.
Ooh.
I'm not a lobbyist, so I leave that up to our very smart professionals that have offices in DC to do all of the actual legislative stuff for hunting. I'll help every now and again with some ideas, but I usually don't get involved in the hardcore politics.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, perfect. I love it. So what's your history in hunting? Why do you love it so much? Why do you find a need to defend it and advocate for it?
Yeah, I grew up in a family of hunters. My father took me hunting when I was 7 years old for the first time, not carrying a firearm. We actually grew up just right outside of Washington, D.C. Grew up 2 miles from the Pentagon. It wasn't a big place for hunting in my neighborhood, but my father was a police officer, and we would escape to hunt in rural Virginia. And it immediately became my home, and I found my place in the woods. And as soon as I worked delivering papers and cutting grass to be able to get my own vehicle, as soon as I had my driver's license, that's when it really all started for me
Mm,
to be able to just go do it myself. And that's all I ever wanted to do
yeah,
was just be in the woods.
yeah,
Whether it was chasing animals or if it was just observing and learning or camping. I was a hardcore Boy Scout. I was in a very active troop that did a lot of camping and high adventure around the country. And I just enjoyed being outside and learning all that I could about the outdoors.
yeah. Man, that is awesome. So, at what point did you just hit the road running and say, "Okay, this is what I want to do"? Was it after college? Was it in high school? Was it, you know?
Yeah, it was after college when I got my first job with Ducks Unlimited. I was a volunteer with Ducks Unlimited right after college. One of those volunteers, all my friends. It was funny. I lived in a house with a bunch of guys after college. We could afford it living in the Washington D.C. area, and we were close friends. But when I finally got hired after 5 years of volunteering, and I was all excited about, I got my first job with Ducks Unlimited, and they were like, I thought you worked for Ducks Unlimited for the past 5 years because I had volunteered so much for them. So I knew when I first started volunteering that I wanted to do something in that arena. My mom always said, "Do what you love, and the money will follow." Well, it didn't always follow. Working in the nonprofit sector doesn't make you a rich man, but it certainly fulfilled me with what I wanted to do as a life goal.
Yeah. Man, that's something else. I believe in being a public educator for the last 18 years. I see, society up close and personal, and I work with them, and I work with youth. There are at times where volunteerism and giving back is a huge push, but it seems like it's lost along a lot of people, and most of the time it's because we are just trying so hard to get by and to achieve and grow in our own lives that we forget. And I always say this on the podcast, that you can never outgive good. When you are
Yeah.
constantly putting good out into the world, things will just naturally boomerang back to you. Kind of like what your mom is saying is like, do what you love, the money will follow. It's like, you know, you just keep putting good out into the world and you'll always be taken care of.
Yeah, it is amazing how many organizations are dependent on volunteers. Most nonprofit outdoor organizations, whether you're talking about Ducks or Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation or Wild Turkey Federation or even the NRA Friends system, it's reliant on those volunteers. And not just if we're talking about hunting, but American Heart Association, where my wife works for, and PTAs and all those things. The amount of massive volunteers. Hunters for the Hungry is another great one,
Yeah.
mostly run by volunteers. It's so important to be able to if you have the time to give back and help any way you can in those ways, because those volunteer hours mean so much.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I feel like when I got into the hunting industry, or not even the hunting industry, when I became a hunter, my, maybe it was the fact that I was 30 years old when I took my hunter safety, and it wasn't until I was 33 that I notched my first big game tag. And the fact that I was already a parent and more mature in my life, that I came up with this message of mentorship is conservation. Well, the whole idea of mentorship is giving back. Is if you want to see hunting last for generations to come, you got to invest in the hearts and lives of other people. This is not something that's going to sustain on its own. We have to teach the youth. It says in the Bible that, you teach the children the ways of how they're supposed to be raised, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. It's the same thing where we need to educate the youth, we need to educate the society, we need to give them talking points, teaching points, but not only just that, we need to give them tangible, real perspectives that come through experiences. Because when someone has an experience, that's never lost, and it always
Right.
trumps an opinion.
You're
And
right.
so often in this world, people just throw out opinions left and right, like, yeah, bam, bam, bam. It's like, hold on. Do you actually know what you're speaking about? Uh,
And when you're talking about volunteerism and R3 mentoring, so R3, if your audience is not aware, recruitment, reactivation, and retention. It's what most of the hunting NGOs and the state wildlife agencies have been pushing for the past 10 years to try to recruit the next generation of hunters in the United States. So if you can find an individual that's willing. So when you say I'm volunteering for my PTA, I give up a Saturday to go sell some raffle tickets or work at the door. I've given my time and probably a little bit of my money, which is great. Those people are all very appreciative for all the organizations across the billions of hours that are donated. But a hunting mentor, a volunteer hunting mentor, is not only giving up all the things that you, but they're probably also giving up an opportunity at an animal
mhm.
that they have a tag for or have time to do. It is one of the most selfless acts that I can imagine in my life, because I have a small universe. I don't have children. I spend it hunting or working for hunting. That's my entire my poor wife has tolerated this for our 29 years together, 25 years of marriage, of me either traveling on the road for hunting as work, working in defense of it, or raising money to save wetlands, and then I come home and unpack a bag and repack a bag to go hunting somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, so I understand this selfless act of volunteers giving up their time, their knowledge, their money, but also the opportunity at an animal. It is such an important thing that these people are doing because the opportunities, if you don't grow up in a family of hunters, to actually learn to hunt is extremely small
Yeah.
in the United States. And as you and I are talking here, we'll talk for an hour tonight. When we're done talking tonight, the chances will even smaller for the next person. Every minute we go by the day in the world, unfortunately, the opportunities shrink for people
Mm,
because land is getting purchased by people that are not going to allow you to hunt. And there are less people. Our population is growing with people that don't hunt. So we're gobbling up more land for developments, which is taking opportunity away from hunters. So every day, the opportunity shrinks, unfortunately, in the United States. So people that give up their time and their opportunity, it is unbelievably important for the next generation of hunters in this country.
man, you're the first person that's actually addressed that when speaking with me, because when I started hunting, I also started mentoring other hunters. It's like I wanted to be a fisher of men, but I wanted to be a fisher of men for hunting. Like, hey, come join me. Have you not done this? Have you not experienced it? It's the best thing. The issue was I lived in the state of Washington at the time, and I hunted modern rifle, and modern rifle is 2.5 weeks. And I was a school teacher and a football coach, in which means I had 4 days of time in which I could
It
actually
is
get
done.
out.
Yes. Yes.
And then it's like, then that's it
That's it.
until the following
All you
year.
got.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I completely understand that. I saw a study one time, so don't quote me on these exact details, but the average hunter in the United States has 7 days. That's
Mhm.
all they get. Um, and the 77% of them, I think at the time, chase a white-tailed deer.
Yeah.
That's the main ungulate that we're chasing in the United States. So you're asking, and there's a portion of those people that hunt private land and those people that hunt public land. And if we're asking somebody to give up one, two, three of those 7 days, and then if they're hunting public land, to introduce a new person to their secret spot, it is a big ask.
Yeah.
And I understand why some people don't do it. They don't want the competition, but the people that do it, good on them.
Yeah.
There's an organization out there that we support through the Hunters Leadership Forum called the First Hunt Foundation. They are the largest youth and adult shooting and hunting mentoring organization in the United States. They now have mentors in all 50 states, probably not one in every corner of all 50 states, but they do thousands of days a year
Yeah.
mentoring people to not only shoot, but to hunt. They do the safety part first, teaching them how to get their gun sighted in and go through the equipment checks. And then they are giving up their opportunity all day long to get to introduce new people to this thing that we have found so important in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been meaning to get, the founder of First Hunt Foundation out of Idaho, correct?
Rick Brazel.
Yes, Rick
Yes.
Brazel. I have his business card. We've talked multiple times. I just have yet to get him dialed in on the podcast. But I love the yes, like what you're saying is like, it's so fascinating the progression of a hunter, right? The five stages of a hunter and how it's the last stage is typically where people are like, well, I'd rather watch somebody else shoot and have them see that
Right.
enjoyment and be
Yep.
give back.
Yep. Yep.
If we could get that last stage to be tied with that first stage
Right.
and say, hey, let's go learn this together.
Yep.
Let's go,
Yep.
let's go journey. I think that's where we're going to get a whole lot more people. I think also, with that being said, is this whole renewal to a self-sustaining lifestyle and homesteading and backyard chickens and all this is
Yep.
also a huge kick in the pants for people where they're like, oh man, I actually don't know how to get my own food.
Right.
We're going to start growing it. We're going to garden. We're going to do chickens.
Yeah.
But I need to actually know how to go out and get it myself.
At one time in the last 5 years, one of the largest segments of growing hunters in the United States, although our numbers are staying stagnant, possibly dropping some years. We had a bump in COVID, but unfortunately lost all those 500,000 hunters that we gained in COVID. We have since lost them. But there was a group of hunters, and it sounds like a disease, but it's called adult onset hunting.
Hmm.
But that's what it's called. It's people that they're later in life, maybe their kids have gone off, they're not supporting them anymore, they have a little extra money, and they want to know where their food comes from.
Hmm.
So that was a big bump that we had of new hunters that didn't grow up normally in a hunting family, which is the normal path of most hunters in North America. But they are people that want to know where their food comes from. The locavore movement.
Yeah. Why do you think that that has grown so much?
Well, it's because I mean, I think that a little bit of the insecurity in our world or our country and the economy, they want to be able to source their own food, and then also with all the chemicals that they're throwing in the foods. I was just out this weekend with some coworkers. We were doing some target shooting, and the family that we were target shooting on their farm, their goal is to never go to the grocery store again. They have 5 kids. They just had triplets. Um,
Wow.
and their goal is to never go to the store again. They're raising their own beef. They're raising their own hogs. They're got a garden. They're going to build a greenhouse because they want to know where their food comes from. They've
Yeah.
got 5 young children. 3 of them were just born. They got their hands full. Um, but they want to feed those kids starting off with no hormones or anything that's being put in our foods.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. I want to go back here in a second. You said something that I found truly fascinating, and yet I have a hard time believing. When you say that we gained 500,000 hunters during COVID, but then lost them all,
We did.
what do you mean by that? Because I feel like once somebody gains the knowledge and has the experience, whether they're actively buying a hunting license, they're then going to be able to support hunting through the ballot box, which is a big push right now, especially in like Colorado and all that.
Oh, you're speaking my language. Yeah, so there's several different means that the state wildlife agencies count hunting license sales. You can There is a list that you can get, and if you know how to look out of it and dedupe the out-of-staters, we saw in COVID that we had a bump. So everyone was home. They were looking for something to do. So they were probably at one time hunters, and they went and bought a license. Now, it doesn't mean that those 500,000 people that we gained. Now, we saw in the subsequent years So we went from like 14 million hunters to 14.5, and now we're back down to 14.
Mhm.
So somewhere we had that rise and then we lost. So it doesn't mean that those people won't come back in a couple of years. They may be relapsed hunters, but we did see in the blip of hunting succession licenses purchased, unique licenses purchased, a 500,000 up and a 500,000 down.
Huh. Fascinating.
Yeah.
What do you, I love how you're like, ah, you're speaking my language, talking about ballot box initiatives and
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. It's garbage that the anti-hunting crowd is so deceitful in how they share
Mhm.
information that these
Yeah.
people that are indifferent towards hunting or neither pro nor con can get fed lies
Yeah.
through mainstream media or public awareness. That's just not true.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very unfortunate because it ultimately will hurt the resource. We need hunters on the landscape. They are it's science. We, North American model with conservation is what we have in the United States. That's what we use to manage our wildlife populations. It's different than Europe and it's different than in Africa, where is basically the North American model of conservation basically says that the animals are owned by the people and managed by organized government. That's basically what the gist of the North American model is. So, and it's done through science, not done through emotion.
mm,
And the state wildlife agencies are the response. They're the responsible organization that is managing ecosystems. So, and they're managing ecosystems by managing wildlife. So we have very smart biologists that work for those organizations, and they understand the carrying capacity of the land, and it's their job to to make sure that we are taking the excess. And that is what's the jobs of hunters. And then hunters come in, and we pay a license fee. So we're paying to help the state manage that excess population, the surplus, everything above the carrying capacity of the land. And by our dollars that we spend, billions of dollars a year, it then helps the state wildlife agencies match their Pittman and Robertson dollars,
mhm,
which comes from a tax on firearms and ammunition, which ultimately pays for the majority of conservation in the United States. And it was surely the only conservation method we had in the United States for almost 60 years. So it's unfortunate that the anti hunters don't want to believe in science. They want to focus on their feelings
mm,
and they want all us to adjust to their feelings.
yeah.
And listen, I'm all for freedom. Do say whatever you want, but don't affect what I'm going to do, especially when our group is helping science.
Well,
Um,
it's all about speaking the truth, right? That's the whole issue is like, and the truth shall set you free. The truth brings freedom. The truth brings abundance. The truth brings goodness. The fruits of the spirit. It's not when you're lying and deceiving people that's sowing wickedness in this world and no wonder there's division when there's people intentionally lying about how to go about things.
it's true. It's very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. That's why we as hunters need to do a better job of telling the story
Hmm.
of conservation in America. We're all taught it in hunter education. It's a required topic that we have to learn about Pittman Robertson, and we have to learn about the difference between market hunting before the 1900s and then what happened afterwards, the Lacey Act and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and all the things that we did as citizens to make sure that we were having laws and we were regulated and we were following science.
Right.
And we need to teach that because in some of the research that the Hunters Leadership Forum did back in 2015, we learned that once we share those truths with a non hunter, they are 79 at the time, they were 79% more likely to support hunters' activities.
Yeah.
When we told them that regulated legal hunting in the United States has never been the result of any animal going extinct, any species going extinct, and it's the exact opposite. We have brought wild turkey, elk, white-tailed deer back from very low levels. It is the conservation through hunting that has brought those animals back. And when we share that story, and this is not Peter Churchbourne's opinion, this is factual information that we found when we did this massive research project with focus groups and follow-up interviews with non-hunters in America. We found very specific things that if we told them and they believed that it was true and they were true, they would support us.
Mm.
We actually end up writing a book about it called How to Talk About Hunting, Communication Strategies for Hunters to Non-Hunters.
Well, let's get into that because I just Googled the definition of conservation because a lot of people, they don't actually understand the definition of words. We throw words out like it's going out of style, but no one actually
Right.
knows what it means. I just did a podcast, released a couple episodes ago about how hunting is a right, not a privilege, because privilege means that not everybody has access to it. When hunting, everyone does have access to us, whether or not you choose to participate. And so the term conservation, I just randomly pulled up whatever the first thing on my website, it says the act or process of conserving. Okay, well, conserve means to make sure that there's some left for the next, next people, next generation, whatever.
Right.
The second one, this is where it gets a little confusing, a little tricky. Because in the term conservation, the word preservation is used as a definition to support conservation. And there's a
Mm,
huge difference when it comes to the preservation of wildlife and the
mhm.
conservation of wildlife. And this is where our
Absolutely.
listeners need to actually understand this and articulate it to the public and who they interact with. It says preservation or restoration from loss, damage, or neglect. And that is the anchor of it, is that preservation doesn't mean animals that are here and making sure that they continue. It's from the loss, damage, or neglect of taking care of them. And we take care of them through the conservation efforts of maintaining wildlife habitat, of Pittman Robertson dollars to support wildlife, wildlife, wild places, wild things, all that. So I'm huge on the words in which we use to articulate how we promote and defend hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. How I always explain it to people, simpler, I'm a simple guy, is conservation means wise use. It's a wise use of a resource. It means you can use that resource, whether it's if we're logging timber off of public land, we're doing select cutting. We're using scientists to go out there and make sure that we're managing it correctly. Preservation, how I have used it, means no use. And preservation is not good for what we do, because you can only preserve things for so long. Humans have changed everything on this planet. Something we do affects something down the road.
Yeah.
So you can only preserve something for so long before, in the world we live in today, scientists have to get involved and do some efforts to make sure that it can continue to operate in those same manners,
Mm,
which means you have to go in there and manage it.
yeah.
Um, because what we've done to this planet is something affects the next thing every time.
Yeah.
It requires constant management. Like it or not, listen, I would like to live in a world where there was about 27 billion less people, but we don't. So we have to manage the resource.
Right. And with that comes the idea that we have to trust the people who are managing it.
Absolutely.
And that is an issue of like, who do we listen to? Who's doing the managing? I come from the state of Washington where the wildlife board was assigned and nominated by a Democrat governor who is anti-hunting, and so now you have the managing board, the governing body over fish and wildlife, who's like anti-hunting, and they've been stripping bear hunting, cougar hunting, like they're attacking, mule deer and elk, and starting to like, where does it stop, or how
Yeah.
does it start? That's
That is an alarming trend, unfortunately, what's happening with the what do they call it in Washington? Is it the
yeah,
council
yep,
commission? Is it the
the
commission?
commission, the Fish and Wildlife Commission, yep,
A lot of states call it the commission. Yeah, it's an alarming trend what's going on there. It's certainly because that takes the science out of managing wildlife populations, and they need to be. You're going to hear me say that a million times because I talk about it all the time.
well, it's good.
Science, science, science,
Yeah,
science, science, science. It cannot be feelings and emotion. That's not how we manage things.
yeah.
Not
Well,
going to work.
I found it really interesting. Is probably about 4 years ago, I was given a seminar on black bear hunting 101 at the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo out in Salt Lake City. And I had a fish and wildlife officer from the state of Arizona come to my seminar, and they sat in on it. And I was talking with them, and they were not a hunter. And what I learned very quickly is that a lot of state agencies don't require their agents, or even to work at the agency, to require hunter safety. It blew my mind. I was like, how can somebody who is supposed to be an advocate for this not even understand what the Pittman Robertson Act is or what conservation is? It really, like, that was very troubling and alarming for me. Have you seen
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yes, well, I have. There's some great state wildlife agency employees out there that are hardcore hunters, and there's some that are doing this because they are like to be outside.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily they didn't grow up as a hunter, and that's okay. I don't I don't mind that whatsoever, just as long as they respect why the state wildlife agency is there.
Right.
Um, what the job is that they're supposed to do. As long as that they recognize that and they can work with the needs of hunting, because that is ultimately their goal.
Hmm.
I but yes, I have seen that in a lot of instances.
I found it very troubling because there's no checks and balances. All of a sudden, you get somebody who is pro, and I'll use the term pro wolf, not because I think wolves on the landscape's cool. I just bought a wolf tag for state of Idaho because they're there and I want to go hunt them. The issue is when we want to reinstate wolves and then not manage them and not have that ability to hunt them. Well, if somebody writes an article from the Fish and Game Department and is pro wolf, anti hunting of wolves, and there's no checks and balances, that's an issue. Um,
That certainly needs to be on that state level. That's where you have hopefully other citizens that can get involved and correct the make sure the wrong leaning rules if they're having the ability to affect how you are managing that population. That certainly needs to be dealt with.
yeah. Well, let's talk about this study that you guys ended up doing about American attitudes towards hunting and how to talk about it. Why don't you go ahead and give a little background on that and
Sure. Yeah. So that basic study has been done for many, many, many years, and it's usually been paid for by multi-state grant, which is a pool of PR dollars that get pulled aside for special projects. The Hunters Leadership Forum that was started in 2015 as a philanthropic side of the NRA to deal with special hunting projects decided to take it a little deeper. So instead of a normal internet survey or a multimedia poll that was done on the phone and internet, we actually did focus groups with people all around the United States, and we filled those focus groups with, make sure that we had every ethnicity, race, color, creed in every one of them, so that we could get the general opinions on American attitudes on X.
mhm.
And we did them in all over the United States. We learned a lot of information. We actually ended up doing a follow-up research project, and then Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation got another grant from the multi-state grant pool and did another research project that helped quantify some of our information. But basically, to boil it down, thousands of pages of research, we learned a lot about what the non-hunting adults in America think of hunting and hunters, all the way from harvesting a squirrel to harvesting a black rhino. We measured their attitudes on hunting outside the United States. And we found that there were very specific things that hunters can do to change the attitudes and increase what I call cultural protectance of hunting.
Hmm.
That wasn't our vernacular 7 years ago when we did this research, but cultural protectance of hunting. Because as we talked about earlier in the podcast, that hunter numbers are dropping in the United States. They're staying about steady now. Our three professionals are working very hard to try to recruit the next generation of hunters. And I've been at this game for many, many, many years. I go to all the R3 symposiums and the state wildlife agency meetings. I'm engaged in the R3 programs that we do at the NRA and helping other NGOs, along with the nonprofit that I help out, Outdoor Stewards of Conservation Foundation. And we are throwing everything against the wall to make it stick. And we still have a populace that is not very interested in hunting. And there's many reasons for that. We have a change in our family value system in America.
Mhm.
We have a change where we live. I have this whole presentation that I do of talking about the change of rural America to urban America
Mm.
and where that shift happened in the 50s and the 60s when we left rural America and we started making population centers around city, and then those cities grow. So that does several things to us as a community. If we move from rural to urban. So number one, we're taking land away in an urban environment that was probably once hunted. So right there, we've taken land out of use. If you're buying a 5 acre piece of ground, you're going to build a house on it. There's probably not a whole lot of things you could hunt on that anymore.
Mhm.
Or if you're living in a subdivision that has 1,000 homes in it, it was probably a 2,000 acre farm. Now it's full of sidewalks and concrete. So we don't have that place to hunt. And then when you develop urban America, you're going to have now all the business parks. You're going to have everything that will make you be able to live in an urban environment. So your availability to find a place to hunt living in an urban environment is extremely small. You're going to have to drive further away. And we know from studies, the further you have to drive away from your home to do something, the less likely you are to do it. That's just common sense. But also, when we move to urban environments, our values change. We get involved with PTAs. The kids get involved with sports and travel sports. We may do more with our church. We may do more with our schools. And you meet other people that have other things that you want to learn to do. So hunting does not become part of the family unit system. And we've seen that happen for the past 40 years in the United States. When that's why we've had this decrease in hunting. And it's even harder now to recruit somebody that wants to do that and retain them because we have, as I just spoke about, and now every minute I talk, we're having less places for those people to go hunt. There's less and less opportunities. And that's one of the biggest complaints that we hear from new hunters that we recruit and we get them going. They have no place to go. And guy like me, not like you, you're still new in your hunting career. I don't care if I shoot another animal in my life. I like watching other people do it. Um, so I like to take them to do it. But new hunters want to be successful.
Mhm.
We always say it's not about what we kill, but for a new hunter, it is. They want to bring home meat. They want to show that they've got something, and I get that. I understand that. But if they can't find a place to be successful,
Mhm.
then they're only going to do it for so long before they go, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm going back to watching football. I'm going back to doing whatever I'm going to do.
Yeah, being a school teacher, specifically in physical education, I know that if a child doesn't have success within the first couple attempts, then they're going to give up and then walk away from it and not ever participate in it again. I
You
know
bet.
that firsthand. One of the things, and this is an opinion, I'm asking you your opinion, not you, Mr. Hunter
Okay.
Leadership Forum and
All
all
right.
that. So, like, this is going to be an interesting one.
Okay.
We want more people to be pro hunting.
Right.
We need more hunters for Pittman Robertson and money side of it. but do
Yeah.
we really need more hunters?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Do-
that's a sweet spot right now.
okay.
That is a sweet spot where, and I'm actually on a task force for another organization with a bunch of other industry professionals just like me that are looking at that question right now about what is the magic number of hunters in the United States.
Hmm.
I want everybody out there that wants to hunt to be able to hunt. I want them to find the religious experience it is to hear a turkey gobble on the roost just before sunup. I want them to have the experience of providing that wonderful organic protein, that healthy food for their family. I want them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but we have to tailor those expectations of what they're really going to be able to get done with what we have left to hunt in the United States. And I don't know if we have the room for everybody to hunt that everybody wants everybody to hunt. So that's a complicated one.
Yeah.
This R3 community, they're trying very hard. They're doing the best they possibly can to get these new people out there. I've heard numbers throw out there that we're at 14 million hunters. We would love to get at 25 million hunters. I don't know if we have places for 25 million hunters to hunt.
Mm.
I don't think we do. But one thing I do want to do is to make sure that every non-hunter understands our value and then when given the opportunity votes in our favor.
Correct.
So if that means taking someone who's never hunted hunting with me so they can experience it, because we learned in our research that people will vote in our favor just because they know us. We asked people, well,
Yep.
why did you support that hunter? Well, I know Bob, he's my neighbor and I don't want to do it, but he seems like a good guy and he hunts, so
Yeah.
I'll support what he does. We need that because hunters in the United States only represent about 4.5 to 5% of the population of America. So here's a scary one. This is not Peter's numbers. This is the U.S. Census Bureau numbers.
Okay.
If you go on the U.S. Census Bureau website, it says that in 25 years, we will have 72 million more Americans living in the United States. So our population in 25 years, they say, will be just over 400 million people. We're right now at about 365 million people on the last census. So 72 million more people living here. That is going to gobble up more land. It's going to require more resources. And if we have been as unsuccessful in recruiting the next generation of hunters, because remember, we've been at this for 10 years, trying hard. Our population has grown in 10 years. So I call it the gap. It's the difference between if your audience could see me, I'm holding my arms up like a heart right now. But is the growing population of hunters and the decreased population, if you're the growing population of non-hunters and the decreased population, the separation is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're becoming less of a pool. So if that same trend continues and the US Census Bureau is right, and we don't recruit, we stay right at 14 million hunters, 15 million hunters, in 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 25 years from now, we will be 2% of the United States population. And that's scary numbers.
Man, I got so
That's
many
why
different.
it's so important. It's so important that all those people recognize our importance to conservation in the United States and the management of healthy ecosystems and game populations.
Right, right. See, I'm a believer in tribal roles. That not everyone needs to be a hunter, but everyone benefits from knowing a hunter, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the whole kind of question that I asked before is like, does everyone need to be a hunter, or does everyone just need to know how impactful it is, and then support it through, voting and ballot box and all that?
Yeah, ballot box biology. It's very important that the next several we're at a tipping point here with this whole hunting, and I just today spent an hour watching, and for your audience out there, if you want to understand what point creep means, Randy Newberg did a great video on YouTube that I kind of knew what it was, but and I'm not a big Western ungulate hunter. I love chasing birds and waterfowl, which I'm so grateful that that is all I want to do, because it's easier to find a place to chase ducks and upland birds than it is to get a big game tag in Western states right now. But so, and I'm helping somebody write an article on that right now. So I wanted to educate myself. I spent an hour today watching Randy Newberg's YouTube on point creep. He did a great job explaining why that's happening.
Mm. You know, it's fascinating getting into hunting later, being a part of that adult onset hunter crew. I was looking at my hunting future, like looking out in the landscape of, and I'm like, if it takes 17 points to draw a quality elk tag, and I'm already starting at, I got my hunter
40.
safe, yeah, like at
Yeah,
40,
40.
like,
It'll be 57.
yes,
What are those knees going to be like at 57?
right? So,
Hey,
no,
I'm right there right now. I get it.
but that was one of the things that like woke me up big time, is like, whoa, we need
Yep.
to be talking about this.
Yep. Yep.
Um, Going back to the whole idea of like, not everyone needs to be a hunter, but they need to understand the benefit of it. You guys came out with a book, How to Talk About Hunting.
Yep.
How do we do it? What
Yeah.
did you guys find?
Yeah. So the biggest things that we found that we need to relay to non-hunters. The number one biggest thing that they said was about the food.
Mm,
They need to understand that we actually eat the meat,
yeah.
and we use it to feed those less fortunate. So in our study, and if somebody wants to look me up after this, I've written a million articles. I'm easy to find out on the internet, and most of the stuff that I've written is out there too. Is that we harvest about 660 million pounds of wild game annually in the United States. That's everything. That's deer, elk, bison, ducks, geese, everything. About 660 million pounds of reoccurring natural animals on the landscape that we are not feeding. We are not having to take land out of production. We're not giving them hormones, and we are harvesting the surplus of what is there. So next year there'll be 660 million pounds for us to harvest again,
Mm,
to feed ourselves and to feed our families and to feed those less fortunate. Almost 19 million pounds a year are given away to soup kitchens and food shelters and Hunters for the Hungry organizations. So when non-hunters learned the truth about um, the meat consumption, they were 98% likely to support our activities.
wow.
Now, when they came into these focus groups, they weren't necessarily 98% supportive on the food. We had to say to them, okay, so Mr. or Mrs. Non-hunter, you said you don't support hunting activities, but if we told you this and you found out that it was true, would you support us? And they were like, absolutely, if that was true. Because
Mhm.
I've always told from my social media posts that you all just shoot a big animal, the Hartford elk, and you cut the head off and you mount those horns.
Right.
Um, but once they learn that we are required, there are wanton waste laws, that there is a law enforcement agency that monitors our activities and requires that we use it, then they're more likely to support us.
Mm,
The second one of the second largest one was about the fact that we have never made a species go extinct, and it's the opposite. Conservation has helped species come back to a manageable level.
mm.
Uh, and that I lump that into what I call biodiversity. And some people hate when I use that word because it sounds biodiversity. Sounds something that somebody that hates us would use. But that's the truth. That's what we are helping with. We are helping state wildlife agencies manage the population. So we pay money to help them do their jobs, which is what the North American model of conservation stands for. Managers, animals are owned by the people, and they're managed by organized government. We pay to have that done, and our efforts help those conservation efforts. So that was the biggest one. I lumped that in. We even had a woman say in one of our focus groups was, you mean that your efforts will help me run into less deer with my BMW? And we said, that is the goal, because our goal is to manage that surplus so that they're not running all over the roads all the
Right.
time. He said,
If
oh,
you let us.
yep, I'm all about that.
Yeah.
So, but we learned that we break it down to those personal experiences with
Yeah.
people. It helps them understand.
Yeah.
Um, the third was economy. Once they learned how much hunters spend in the rural systems in the United States, I mean, hunters in some rural communities make their budget. If hunters don't roll into places in South Dakota and Kansas and spend money on food, hotel rooms, and hunting licenses and guide services, those towns sometimes don't make it. So the economy is a big effort.
Mhm.
Those were the three largest things, but the number one is the food
Man.
aspect.
Interesting. I was telling you before we hit the record button a little bit about my history and how my very first big game animal was a black bear. I actually shot it in front of a female yoga instructor and her two students 9 miles into the backcountry of the state of Washington.
Oh
And
my goodness.
they were like, "What are you doing up here?" I'm like, "Hunting. What are you doing 9 miles on a day hike?
Right.
Like, what are you hunting? Black bear. There's bears up here." I was like,
Oh
"Yes,
my
there's
goodness.
bears up here." They're like, "Well, what are you gonna do with it?" I'm like, "I'm gonna eat it." You can eat black bear? Oh
Mm,
yeah. And at this point,
yeah.
I've never had it because I was a brand new hunter and never
Right.
eaten any wild game. But at the
Right.
same time, like, I'm doing it.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, we're gonna eat it and take the fat and render it down and all this stuff. Well, ended up shooting a bear, not like directly in front, but the female yoga instructor from Seattle, she's actually the one that spotted the bear. She's like, ah, bear, and I was like, no
Oh my
way.
goodness.
And
Oh my goodness.
so all this went down. It was quite an experience, and what I learned very fast is we need to be able to articulate why hunting has the power to transform lives. And whether it's through the food that we eat, the businesses that come about it and sustaining life for our families and our networks and all that, or what you were talking about is to make sure that it does last for generations. The conservation, like we've brought animals back, and it's not a them. It's not a back in the day. It's us now currently. It's like using the old English language with the ETH at the end. It means it's still continuing. Like I liveth. I'm living and I'm always going forward.
Right.
And that hit me so hard that I was like, okay, it doesn't matter if I'm 9 miles into the wilderness. It doesn't matter if I'm at my job, on Instagram, or I'm standing on a subway with somebody. If I am a hunter, I need to always be wearing that hunter badge for everyone to see and to be able to articulate it so that they can understand and at least question what are their stances.
You
Because
bet.
like you said, it all comes down to experience.
You bet.
Experience lasts forever. Opinions are just like the wind. They
Yep.
blow here and there.
Yep. 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 So being able to articulate that, I always tell hunters to get your elevator speech down. So when you're given the opportunity, you know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. But we also learned that there were some very important things that we shouldn't be doing that can change a supporter into a non-supporter and then turn a non-supporter into a deep non-supporter. And it's a lot of about the pictures that we post now. Boy, let me tell you, I've gotten some nasty grams from people when I talk about this. But you can go on our nrahlf.org. There's a resource page, and we have a whole Word document that we set up as probably a PDF that talks about posting the right photo of your harvest on social media. One of the biggest things that non-hunters said they don't want to see are certain gory pictures of the domination on top of an animal, hugging an animal in the back of a pickup truck, on top of a four-wheeler. Things like that turn them against us.
Mhm.
Um, Excessive blood, tongue hanging out of the mouth. That we need to do a better job. And I listen, I get it all the time, people. How dare you tell me what I can and can't post? I'm not telling you what you can't. I'm just saying we learned from research what will, and remember, we are the minority. We are not the majority of America. So we have to be cognizant. If we want to keep doing this for a long time,
Hmm.
be cognizant of what the non-hunter's feelings is on these things.
Yeah.
And we can do very simple things to keep their support. They don't mind pictures of dead animals as long as it's a respectful pose. So we have, it's so easy now to write something on a photo. You can do it on your iPhone. Like you post the picture of you and your deer, and you just write on the bottom, this is going to feed my family for the next year. And that makes the instant connection of, oh, I understand that more.
Mm.
And we learn. So we have a whole hunting photo considerations, I think it's called, posting the right photo,
I,
about making sure that we're representing ourselves. And then also not using words like, if it's brown, it down. If it flies, it dies. We love these animals. We do. That's one of the things that I've explained to people. So how can you kill that animal? It's the hardest part of any hunter. So I don't really care if I ever did it again. I enjoy taking other people and letting them experience that, but that's not why we're doing it. So when you make that the part of the hunt that they're most not likely to like, it makes you less likable. So when you're talking about, yeah, I smoked that guy, it's not the language we need to use about this thing that we hold so much respect in. So we need to learn to better represent ourselves to non-hunters to make sure that we have their support.
I love that. Playing devil's advocate at the same time, at what point have we become such soft and watered down that, like, come on.
Again, and it doesn't mean that you and I can't have those emotional experiences with each other.
Yeah.
We shoot an animal and we do a big hug, a celebration of it, to a non-hunter seeing that video of you and I hugging after we just killed this animal. They don't get the emotion that's tied up with that. But that's something we don't have to show them.
Yeah.
That's between us. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And we understand that between us, but they don't get it because they weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we're going soft. It's just recognizing the position that we're in, and we need them. So we have to make some change.
It's interesting. I am pro hunting, like, without a doubt. I'm pro sovereignty before that, though. Like, don't cross this line in my life, because my family, everyone's been impacted through COVID, but 100% I knew exactly where the line was in the sand for me and my family.
Right.
With that being said, I went through a leadership program one time where there was this guy who was in my cohort specifically that we just were like oil and water. We, in my education, when I was in college, I had a professor tell me, he goes, there are going to be students that you just are allergic to. Doesn't matter, like, however kind you are, you're just going to be allergic to them. Right. This guy was kind of like that. And he added me as a friend on Facebook. And I ended up posting a hunting picture where I'm smiling with a killed animal that I killed. And he commented on it, why are you smiling in this picture?
Right.
And everything inside of me was like, doggone it, you, once again, why are you even here? But then I was like, well, no, what am I standing for? I'm standing for hunting. I'm standing for advocacy and all this. So I said, all right, let's go. I go, have you ever fished? And he's like, yeah. Have you ever caught a fish? Yeah. Did it make you happy when you accomplished your goal of catching a fish? And he goes, he didn't want to acknowledge it. I go, yeah, I'm happy. I set out for a goal and I accomplished it. I'm happy.
Right.
And
yeah, well, he reached out, so it was an opportunity for you to engage and educate.
Yeah.
We did a lot of debate strategy when we did a big podcast, not a podcast, 4-hour-long videos to industry professionals. We had like 1,000 people on these. It was during COVID when we couldn't meet in person. And we were talking about the findings of the book, and we hired some of the debate coach from Cornell University, some of the best debate team in the United States, to talk about that interaction and how you win that argument or at least make them understand your point. And one of the biggest things that came out of that in our trainings was when someone is too far gone, end the conversation. Just agree to disagree, because you're never just, and we learned in our research that's like 2.5% of America are that way, that you cannot change their mind and they will argue with you. So there's no reason. Just agree to disagree. They have their opinions, you have your opinions. You're never going to change their mind. They're never going to change your mind.
Yeah.
So when you reach that point with somebody, walk away.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get bad after that.
It's okay to block people also and delete comments. And like, this is what, like just because they posted doesn't mean it has to stay there. You're welcome to delete it.
Yes, exactly right. If that's your page, you're allowed to do what you want.
Yeah. So fascinating, man. Peter, I'm really loving this conversation because this is the type of conversation that needs to be had. And what I get frustrated hearing you say, we did this huge 4-hour long seminar, but for industry professionals. Like, when is that going to be opened up to the mass?
Yeah, well, if people can find it out on the internet, God, it was like 5 years ago. People can find it. It's out there on the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting. Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports website. Yeah, I'm a board member on there.
I've applied for a job there before.
Oh, really?
Yes.
They did that with us, and they hosted that for us on there. But we wrote many articles. So we wrote this book, and it was basically a research resource book, 200 pages long on research, and they'll put you to sleep. But it's got some really good information in it. But we did write we wrote 6 articles that were in the American Hunter, basically the cliff notes, because that's how I got through school, on the book. It was basically because I would love to get a copy of this book in the hands of everyone that would actually read it, but it's just not feasible. But those articles were, and some of them you can find on the internet about protecting cultural acceptance of hunting. If somebody Googled that, you would find these articles out there.
Interesting.
They were basically the nuts and bolts of the book for the everyday hunter.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a question for you that I feel like it could be a hot topic, a little hot button. It might rub people the wrong way, maybe who hear this, or maybe you. I don't know. We're going to go there because it needs to be addressed. We have this open southern border, where there are a lot of people coming into America. You said that in a couple of years that, the population is going to be growing by millions.
72 million people, yes.
So if there's this giant influx of people who were not raised in the Western culture of North American model of wildlife conservation and understand the ways of the West and this journey of what America is and did and overcame, and there's bumps and bruises and challenging times and perspectives of all different sorts, but in the end, it developed a beautiful thing. With the people that are coming into America are not necessarily legal, whether you call them aliens or illegals or whatever. Do you believe that there's going to be an assimilation problem? And because of that giant majority of not being rooted in the values of American culture is going to then hurt hunting that much more?
Yeah, regardless if they are immigrated through the proper channels or not, I mean, I don't think really any of that matters. It's either they're going to be living here, and yes, it will be a problem if they are able to vote and they are able to participate in ballot box biology, and they do not hold your and my culture, the way we live, whatever that culture is. Right now, we're talking about a hunting culture. Respect the things that we do. Of course, it's going to be a problem, because they will, and this has nothing to do with their illegal or legal people. If they don't hold what you and I hold dear, and they're going to vote us out, whether it's drinking age laws or whether it's firearm ownership, of course it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why I think education is so important, to make sure those people, whoever they are, recognize the importance of what we do for every American.
Right.
What we do, what conservation does in the way that we do it. And there's a lot of other groups that are self-funded that are doing awesome conservation on the landscape, but we're still providing the majority of public land conservation in the United States. And they need to recognize that importance. And if we lose that battle, if we don't do our job in educating those people, then we'll have problems.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
There's no
fascinating.
doubt.
It's fascinating what's going on in this world in this day and age. And
And it's not even just related to hunting.
it,
It's all of our culture. It's everything. Who uses what bathrooms? Those are all things that will be that we've dealt with and we will have to deal with more in the future.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Um, just real quick, in honoring your time and wrapping up, because this podcast, you and I, brother, could go a long time.
We could go till 1 o'clock in the morning. It's already like so. For your audience to know, it's 10:44 on the East Coast, and I am old, and I usually go to bed at like 8:30. My wife was like, "What? We're in bed by 8:30."
I apologize, but thank you for your time. Just real quick, because I don't think we actually hammered this too well at the beginning. So the NRA is National Rifle Association, pro Second Amendment, pro, making sure that lasts. The NRA has a Hunters Leadership Forum and also NRA Hunting. What are
Yes.
those?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. It's very interesting. When the NRA was set up in 1871, so what are we, 153 years old now? When we were set up, the founding fathers put 5 principles together to would drive the organization for forever. And one of those 5 principles, I don't know it by heart, but basically it said that they would recognize hunting as a viable option in the United States, and that it would be the organization's job to make sure that hunting was successful, continued, and the activities of the association would foster those activities in the United States.
Mm,
So it is a part of our foundation. That's why, because people will ask, why is the NRA involved in hunting? We didn't get a lot involved into the politics until into the late 60s and 70s, I think. So we were a program organization before that, putting out all types of firearm safety, education, marksmanship competitions, and hunting programs. So a lot of people may not know it was the NRA in 1949 that started the first hunter education program in the United States, and it was that syllabus that was used exclusively for 26 years
mm,
to teach hunter education in the United States. So the way we're situated in the NRA, we have several different divisions. We have one division called General Operations, and within that division, that does all of our programs: competition, law enforcement, community engagement, and now NRA hunting. Used to be called Hunter Services. And so we have 4 big programs. One is our free online hunter education program that's available in 15 states, NRAHE.org. We have the Youth Hunter Education Challenge, which is an advanced hunter education skills day that 1.4 million kids have gone through in the United States. We have a website for that, Youth Hunter Education Challenge. You can find one near you. We also have the Youth Art Contest. So every year we have about 100 entries from all over the country of people, youth drawing pictures of art. And then we also have the Hunters for the Hungry program, where we support and we advocate for people donating wild game to the various hunter sharing the harvest type organizations in the United States. And then we have the Hunters Leadership Forum, which is done out of our fundraising arm, and it is a philanthropic group of individuals that donated some money so that we, the NRA, would always have a fund to deal with hunting issues. And so that if we had a hard year where we were advocating for something else, we weren't pulling money off of the general fund of the organization, we could still do all of our political work. So we had some very generous individuals, gave us a decent amount of money to start an endowment. And there's enough money that's drawn off that endowment every year that allows us to do really good programs.
cool.
And then, of course, we have our Institute for Legislative Action that does all the policy work. So if something comes up in the United States that is so egregiously wrong with hunting, those smart lobbyists will get involved. And I'll have to tell you, there is so much done every day that no one will ever know about. that they're dealing with a legislator, they're talking to someone, and they're just using common sense going, that won't work because there's a law that says you can't do this. It's just usually educating that lets something not even come to the ballot box.
Mm.
So much of that is done not only by the NRA, but Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and Delta Waterfowl and Ducks Unlimited. They all have policy people that are working in the background to make common sense rules for hunters.
Interesting. That's awesome. I really love that. There was a question I meant to ask a little bit earlier, and I apologize that I'm throwing it out there right now as we're wrapping up. But I saw in the news recently, one of the states, maybe Ohio, maybe West Virginia's governor was talking about, or potentially even signed a bill saying that they're not going to have any taxes on firearms and ammunition. Are you familiar with that at all?
I have not seen that. The Pittman-Roberts is a federal rule, so you can't supersede that. That's paid for actually by the manufacturers quarterly. They self-report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the new Department of Conservation Investment, it's called. So they're the ones, the manufacturers of those firearms and ammunition in the United States. So that can't be superseded. I would be interested to look at that to see what they were talking about.
Interesting. That was one of the things I wanted to ask you because in theory, as a person who's pro 2A, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. But then on the conservation side of it, and the Pittman Robertson is like, how does that
Right.
actually work? What's
Yeah.
that? How can people get involved? What do you guys need from the people that listen to this podcast?
Yeah, if you're a hunter, advocate for hunting. Pay attention. We started based off the research that we did this thing called Wild Game Meat Donation Month. It was the first one last year. It's to draw attention because remember I said earlier in the podcast that non-hunters, best thing they need to understand is that we eat the meat and we use it to feed those less fortunate. So last year's Wild Game Meat Donation Month was all about making sure that if you had an extra tag and you had an extra time to donate some meat to a Hunters for the Hungry or donate some money to one of those organizations. This year, you're getting a sneak peek because I haven't written an article about it yet. I am asking every hunter to share a meal with a non-hunter because we learned in our research that they will vote for you if they know you. So cook them a wild game meal and tell them your story. Tell them how you harvested that animal and you brought it to your table because it will pay dividends for us decades down the road when they're given an opportunity at the ballot box to support or not support us. We learned in our research that they will support you because they know you and they like you and they had a great experience. Again, you're not trying to make them a hunter. They're not going to take your secret spot. You're turning them into an advocate for you.
Yeah.
Share a meal.
Be a likable human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very powerful. Very powerful. I actually I killed my very first elk and I made taco meat,
Nice.
and did tacos at my school. And then when people found out it was elk meat, they were really pissed. And I was like, oh, come on, guys, you're really like this. Like,
Right.
would it have mattered? Did it
Right.
really like,
Right.
there was a story to be told and I missed that opportunity, to some people because of it, but lessons learned. Now I get to, go out moving forward. Brother, thank you so much for sharing your time. Thanks for staying up late to record this podcast. I really appreciate it. These are the conversations that people need to understand. This is why we do the Soul Seekers podcast, because we are seeking after the souls of other people to get them involved. We're seeking after our own soul in the wild. And what is there an old proverb that says a wise man plants a tree knowing that he'll never sit in the shade of it, right? That is our job, to make sure that
long game.
Yes.
It's a long game.
Yes. Play the long game, because don't live in this world of instant gratification, because that is not hunting, right? Like if we wanted instant gratification, we wouldn't be taking up our arms to the woods, because that'd be difficult.
Exactly right.
Guys, be of good cheer. Know that life is happening for you. It's not happening to you. You're not victims of this world. You get to create your own existence, and that starts with speaking the truth about how powerful hunting has been in your own life. Peter, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and all the stuff that you've done over the years to protect and advocate for hunting. I really want to thank you on that. Guys, remember that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure, and you can never outgive good, as mentorship is conservation. I'll see you on the next episode. Remember to always freedom on and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.